What's the most unreasonable demands you have ever had from a roommate? Lived with a guy whose parents lived down the street, so he never cooked or did laundry. His mom did everything for him. Since he never had food in the fridge, he would periodically unplug it to save power, ruining my and our other roommates' food. Also, if the washer or dryer was on while he was sleeping, he would go and turn them off. First week we moved in, I brought my mom to show her the new place. Had warned my roommates. John was in the kitchen making pot brownies. Last but not least, he secretly smoked all my keef. I was going through chemo and radiotherapy for a brain tumor. My housemates drew up a full cleaning rota and bitched when I hadn't cleaned the bathroom. They demanded I cleaned it right there and then, as I was passed out on my bed after a torturous chemo session. Assuming they didn't realize how effing nuts they were and made you go through with cleaning right then and there, I hope immediately after you cleaned the bathroom, you took one step out of the bathroom to symbolize that it was done. Then stepped back in, puked on the floor, said, well, it's not my turn to clean the bathroom anymore, and went back to sleep. Stop cleaning the kitchen. Especially when my friends are here. I can't clean up after myself and it just embarrasses me. Well, history and the state of your bedroom has shown that you can't. And I'm not going to cook my food in filth because of your pride. One of my roommates got mad at us for cleaning her mess, yet when we don't she leaves it for weeks. That he can play music from speakers. But I can only play it from headphones. Edit. My top comment ever is about my shitty roommate in junior year. Wow, this is awesome. I had a roommate who was the reverse. Everything he watched or listened to was headphones on. Screen turned away from everyone else. I asked him about it one day. He said, in a bit of a roundabout fashion, that he didn't want me getting into the same music, movies, TV and games he was partaking in. I got the impression my stamp of approval meant he could no longer enjoy a thing. I'm going to throw out all of your cleaning supplies if they aren't green or eco-friendly. The irony was completely lost on him. I would have put them all in green bottles. I'd have told him he best do all the cleaning then. Because if I have to do it, I'm using whatever chemicals I want. That I leave my door unlocked so she would have access to my room while I was at work. I put my trash bin behind my door and squeeze myself out. If it's moved when I return, I know someone went in. My roommates have been going in every now and then. My mom told me this trick for sneaky landlords, which could be used for roommates. Put a couple of saltines under a mat inside the door. When they step on the mat, they break the crackers. I'm in college, and this past August I moved into an apartment with 3 friends of mine. One of them I wasn't as comfortable with as the others, let's call her Karen. But I was optimistic. Shortly after we moved in, Karen accused me of being the messiest one out of all 4 of us in the kitchen. I definitely didn't agree. I may have left a pan out a few times or not loaded the dishwasher. But I was by no means a pig. Almost out of spite, I decided to start being overly anal about the kitchen. I immediately washed and put away anything I used or ate off of. I labeled and kept track of all of my groceries in the fridge. And most importantly, I did not touch any of my other roommates' messes. I've since watched dishes pile up for days, watched fruits and veggies spoil on the counter, and dug up some truly rank leftovers from the recesses of the fridge. It's all Karen. She's the only one who does this. Literally right now there's rice that's been sitting in the risamaker for 5 days. I watched her make it on Saturday and disappear into her room for 48 hours. I'm just waiting for another accusation. Lived with a dude who moved his boyfriend into his room without asking anyone else in the house and let him stay there without contributing anything to rent or utilities because he needed a place to stay, and yet wanted me to pay extra for utilities and rent because my GF would use the shower when she stayed over on the weekend. I added a penny to my rent check a few times with extra for GF's water usage on the memo line. Got kicked out of a room I was renting because I was using the laundry facilities too often, which is to say 2 times a week. And it was causing my landlord's water bills to go through the roof. This obviously had nothing to do with my roommate letting his girlfriend live out of his room and having an extra body around. No. Stupid thing is, water is cheap. On average 2-3 cents per gallon. I had just moved in with this good looking girl and I asked if she wanted to go out for dinner that evening. I'd made it clear that it wasn't a date. She said, okay. But if I do, I expect to be fully reimbursed for the bus fare and the full cost of my meal and drinks. Also, I will make the choice of the restaurant and your meal cannot exceed the price of my meal. Double quote. I ate by myself that evening. Not a roommate, but my upstairs neighbor. I moved into a basement apartment that had been vacant for a while. And the guy that lived above me, he was not the landlord BTW, was a f-king Fruit Loop. He came downstairs and informed me that I wasn't allowed to lock the outside doors to any part of the building. Told me that I couldn't lock the door between the common laundry area and my personal storage space because he liked to dry his shirts in there. Told me that he had to sleep with his subwoofer on with his TV full blast. His bedroom was directly above mine because he had PTSD. Things started getting moved in my apartment. And I caught him on camera coming into my apartment when I was not home. I immediately started calling the cops on everything he did. Complained to the landlord. And he ended up getting evicted. I now have the best neighbors in the world. And I am hopeful that I will never see this guy again. Lived with a girl who had a dog. And it was a great dog. I loved the dog. But she was not my dog to take care of. More than once. My roommate would be out drinking and so something sleazy and would blow my phone up demanding I rush home to let the dog out or feed her. Whatever. I could be in class, work, or with a friend, but whatever I was doing was less important than what my roommate was doing. Same roommate would call me at work often and demand I provide a key so her fat sleazeball boyfriend could get into our apartment. I refused that. Same roommate would get pissed drunk, lock herself out of the apartment, and killed my phone battery with texts, calls, and FaceTimes to come get her. I did it once. Next time it happened I left her outside for 3 hours to sober up. 3 hours after she was still so drunk she couldn't stand. The 2 times this happened were on New Year's and 4th of July. Both times she fully expected me to leave being with my friends, find a cab, fight traffic, and get her sorry worthless ass. Happy to say I've since moved out and no longer know her. I have 2 demands I made that were considered too unreasonable. 1. Keep the temperature above 65. I had a large roommate who, regardless of the outside temperature, 0F, wanted the apartment to be cold at all times so he wouldn't sweat. After he refused to stop using air conditioning in winter. The other roommates put a lockbox around the thermostat. 2. Don't yell into your microphone after 10 PM. Had a roommate who considered himself a major league gamer. Problem was, he sucked. Every time he died in a game, he'd start screaming. Worse, he played video games until 2 AM. Every day. Having a single room dorm. This was totally unacceptable. My now former roommate told me that I had to pay more of the utilities and needs of the house because I made more money than him. This included whenever he had a party. He told me I had to contribute more to the food and drinks because it was my house, therefore my party too, even though none of my friends were there. On top of that, when I moved out, he stayed in the same house and asked me to leave all my furniture there because he didn't want to buy new furniture for the house. I only left the bed he was using, that belonged to me, and a bookshelf that I didn't need. While I did make more money, thank him. It was like $5k US a year more. It's not like I was swimming in pools full of gold. We are both grad students. Not roommate, but upstairs neighbor. Next to our garage is an overgrown ivy-covered area maybe 5 feet wide. Unused except for some extra garbage cans. So at the end of the summer one year I had a potted plant that died. And I dumped it out in the overgrown area. Just dirt and the dead roots of a tomato plant. He confronted me one day and told me not to dispose of that kind of stuff there because it won't break down and offered me the use of his lawn bags. Sure. Dude. Let me use a gigantic plastic lawn bag to fill the landfill with dirt rather than putting earth with earth in a spot no one sees or uses. I lived in a mother-daughter style house. My one roommate's parents lived downstairs. They owned the house and gave us the upstairs with 3 bedrooms. I lived there for about 4 months before this other guy moved in. And he was horrible. He came with every bad habit you could imagine. Everything from lack of hygiene to sleeping on the couch all day. He had no job and no ambition. His cat was blind and riddled with fleas. Sweet cat though. I wish I could have kept her, one day in particular. He made it a particular point that my habits of getting ready for work were of a major inconvenience for him. He decided that all 400 pounds of him would charge at me from down the hall screaming. I dodged and the next thing I know he's bouncing off the wall onto the floor. I asked him as he's on the floor what he's talking about. And he pointed at my work boots. They bothered him as he was sleeping on the communal couch. Thankfully he and his wretched girlfriend moved out and I shortly after. He was by far the worst roommate I've ever had. TLDR fat guy moves into my apartment. Doesn't clean up himself or after himself and complains my work boots woke him up. I had a piece of shitty roommate who played games all day, barely went to class and left filthy dishes for weeks. I'm talking half-eaten cereal, growing mold, balancing on a stack of PS2 games. He smelled like a fungal infection, so he probably could deal with the foul odor of the room. I ended up cleaning that shitty because I couldn't take it anymore. That only encouraged him to continue being a gross piece of shit. This gem is from my first, and only, roommate. When I was 17 and got my first apartment, my boyfriend moved all of his stuff out and won't return my calls. That means your boyfriend needs to leave. 2. I'm not going to be the only one here without a boyfriend. Oh. And this BTCH was 26 at the time. Yeah. So my boyfriend and I decided to skedaddle on out of there after getting things straight with the landlord. Pretty smart move on her former boyfriend's part in moving out quietly on a Sunday. That was our hit church and then the bar days. So he had the whole day free to flee for his life. When I was a student in London in the 1990s, I had a bedsit with a shared kitchen in a block of some 11 other bedsits. One double was being rented out to a Canadian gay couple who were perfectly sociable to talk to and good housemates. One of their mates who was a GP also came along one afternoon and I was in the kitchen doing some coursework on the counter when their friend hopped up on the counter, pulled down their jogging pants and injected himself in the buttock with something right in front of my work folder. He then proceeded to get very chatty with the Canadians. The subject of discussion turned to common expressions relating to gay sex practices and the UK guy was in dispute with the Canadians about what a prawn cocktail consisted of. After a bit of a dispute, the doctor turned to me and asked me what I thought. I said I wouldn't know. I'm not gay. After a long silence during which I think he assumed everyone in the property was gay, he asked me quite pointedly if I wouldn't mind leaving the kitchen. He didn't even live there. They keep their cat's litter box in our bathroom. My girlfriend and I moved into her sister's 3BDR apt with her 4 cats. They demanded to keep 2 litter boxes in the other 2 bathrooms instead of theirs. But it would be cleaned every 2 days. Nope. Lucky to have it cleaned every 5 days. Told them I didn't want it in our bathroom and they started complaining about there being no other room in the apartment, so they'll either get rid of their cats or I move out. It's f***ing mental. She has health issues, so they can't have it in her bathroom or she'll get sick. But I got back from the hospital last night because my so got sick from, I'm pretty sure, the litter box. I once subleased a room from a couple, paid in cash weekly, within their rented apartment. Everything was fine at first. But about a month after I moved in, the refrigerator died and so my roommates went out and bought a new one and told the landlady, who said fine. Shortly after that I noticed that my food would go missing. It was no big deal because I assumed they were eating it, and since it was early in our relationship I wanted to share and be friendly. But then an entire mayonnaise jar disappeared overnight. So I asked about it and they said the other fridge was for the apartment. But we bought this one. You can't use it anymore. So we have been throwing your stuff out. Double quote. That's just one of the shitty things they did to me in the short time I stayed there. To take out the trash. But here's some context. It was well into our first semester of college, so about 3 months, and she asks me, in a slightly upset tone, if I can start taking out the trash in the bathroom because she is the only one who does it. But listen. For the past 3 motherfucking months. Who do you think has been the only one cleaning the bathroom? Sure as hell hasn't been her. Every weekend I clean the bathroom. And not even a thank you or acknowledgement. But instead what I get is a passive aggressive ask for me to do more. And her to do absolutely nothing. So instead of taking out the trash, I didn't clean the bathroom. We went for a good 2.5 weeks before she finally realized how disgusting the bathroom was, and it was bad. I almost caved and cleaned it. She finally cleaned the bathroom once. And realized how shitty it is, to be fair. That was worse than I had ever had to clean, but she shut the FCK up about me taking out the trash. I don't want bits of your stuff out all over the place. I want the flat to look clean and minimalist. Like a Holiday Inn. Yeah. I want it to look like a hotel. None of these photos and knickknacks and things. Double quote. She didn't want any picture frames or figurines or anything other than books on the bookshelves to reveal that human people live permanently in our flat. Made worse by the fact that it was my girlfriend. She had not thought to mention this before we moved 700 miles to live together. And she herself constantly left huge stacks of papers and craft projects on literally every surface in the place. This sounds like my in-laws. All of the main rooms of the house they live in are painted white. Nothing is hung on the walls because it decreases the value of the house. I hate to tell them. But the fact that the bathroom is missing most of the drywall around the shower and has for the past 2 years is going to decrease it more than a few holes. That and the fact the wiring is so bad. You can't run the microwave and the toaster at the same time without tripping a breaker. But there's decorations on all the horizontal surfaces that are hidden by junk. Mostly food that goes uneaten. Still packaged with like one taken out of it. But God help us if we leave something on the counter we are actively using while cooking or something. More of a rant on a past roommate. Claimed to have just graduated from culinary arts school. Told us she would cook for us. Only ever ate ramen noodles. She tried to kill a spider on our front porch with a can of Raid and a lighter. Still have some residual scorch marks. She also moved in her parents' antique couch into our living room. And then complained that our cats were scratching it up. She suggested we get our cat declawed like hers was. I suggested she get a couch in her room or out of my house. I had a roommate once who was also a chef. Claimed he would cook for us too. One night he was going on and on about this amazing mac and cheese he knew how to make. We were a little high so some delicious mac and cheese sounded amazing. He proceeded to make some craft. Wanna know what he thought was his amazing idea? He took the extra cheese packet from another box and added it to another, then left the unused noodles in the back of the pantry without saying so. This was also the same roommate who was deaf and would jerk it with all the doors locked from the inside so we wouldn't catch him. For real dude. Just go to your room. Will you clean up my mess that I'll leave every day before work so I don't have to come home to the mess that I'll leave every day before work? Also, here is this book on telepathy so you can do it while you're in class all day. This is the same guy that ended up costing me $800 because he was a whiny BTCH and didn't like that Rogers put him on hold for a few minutes, so decided that was grounds to leave all of the equipment at the apartment to be thrown out. Proceeded to tell me I don't care. I'm not paying anything. Man, I hated that guy. I had a housemate who would forbid me from using the ground floor of the house at all when he had his friends over. When it came time for him to move, he also demanded that he keep a key, so he could come in and out as he needed. The first one I put up with just so I wouldn't have to deal with his meltdowns. The second one, yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Guy in my friend group demanded to live in fancy neighborhood. Wouldn't show up to other house showings. We finally found a house we all could afford. 2 hours after signing the lease he told the landlord to tear up his lease and keep the deposit. The rest of us were stuck. He got pissed when we wouldn't tell him the front door code. Told him to FCK off and he faded from our friend group. One time we let one of our friends move in with us before getting to know her very well. Not a good idea, and she ended up being extremely annoying and dramatic to live with. One time she got mad at me because I had the gall to close my bedroom door one night while my friend was over because I was worried we were being too loud. Apparently it was passive aggressive and horrible of me to do that to her. See, I find it f***ing weird when people leave their doors open. I live in a tiny apartment with another guy and every single night he sleeps with his door wide the FCK open and then complains if me flushing my toilet wakes him up. Not a roommate, but my neighbor in the apartment next door. We were told upon move-in that every apartment, 8 in total, is allowed to have 1 car on the property in our designated spots and any extra cars are to be parked on the street. We got a new neighbor, not next door to me, about a year and a half ago that quickly threw the 1 car rule out the door. They used their designated spot and parked their second car in front of the entrance to their apartment. Then we got another new neighbor, living next door to me, about a year ago who saw the other tenant with 2 cars and proceeded to park his second vehicle, a pickup truck, alongside the driveway and the dirt grass area. That makes things tough when it snows and makes the driveway entrance narrow since you're trying to avoid his truck on one side and a snowbank fence on the other. I've mentioned that they're going against the lease by having 2 cars on the property, but they point to the other tenants who have 2 cars and say that they're just following their example. But when my so had his motorcycle parked next to the entrance to my apartment, which ended up being 4 inches onto the walkway, the neighbor next door freaked out and told me it was hazardous to her walking. I said, but what about the truck that you have parked along the driveway? Isn't that a hazard? No. She complains to the landlord and we have to move the bike onto the street for parking, but everyone else with 2 cars gets to stay where they are. My downstairs neighbor once told me that I was no longer allowed to walk through my apartment after 9 PM. He lived under me for 18 months previous with no complaints. I told him he should do us both a favor and not come knocking on my door again. And if it was bad enough that he should call the cops. Well, he called my bluff and the very next night SFPD showed up. They talked with me for a minute then left, saying that they were going to talk with him about when it was appropriate to call the cops. Then ended up arresting him when he flipped the FCK out on them. The building evicted him a couple days later. Not so much a demand, but back in college I was living with 3 other guys. One of which was my friend I've known since the 1st grade. Well, he wanted to get a dog, so we had a house meeting to discuss it. It was very cordial and we all said that we do not want him to get a dog since we don't want to be responsible for taking care of it. Especially since he worked nights on top of school. He was disappointed but seemed to understand. Next day, he shows up with a basset hound puppy. We literally had no idea what to even say, so we just put up with it. I guess the unreasonable part is when he asked us if we could watch her while he was at school work. Dude. Similar experience here. That thing was the absolute dumbest dog on the planet and went as far as to tea on our coffee table a time or 2. Not once, but twice. He would also get out all the time. It got to the point that I would see him a few miles from our house on my bike ride home and I wouldn't even slow down. FCK basset hounds. Had a roommate that demanded to pay way less rent because he felt it was unfair that the apartment aside from his bedroom was fully furnished when he moved in. He was allowed to use anything in the common areas. My TV, game console, dishes, etc. He said it was unfair he didn't get to decorate his own place. So he would only be paying $100 total, instead of the $400 plus utilities that was agreed on. This is after paying rent and utilities late several months in a row. I thought it was hilarious. Because it was his first place after graduating HS. So he didn't have any furniture anyways and had also developed a habit of late parties on weeknights and stealing my stuff. In fact, I found it so funny that I moved all the furniture and items out of the common area. Suddenly he had no TV, no dishes, no cooking utensils, no couch, etc. Just his bed and laptop in his room. Didn't affect me because I was barely home between working 2 jobs anyways. To not touch my silverware to the plate while eating. I'm not even obnoxious about it. How do you not do that? Not my fault you can't handle metal touching a plate. I'm not defending them. But that level of noise aversion could be misophonia. I have it and I've worked damn hard to not let it FCK over my social life. But God help you if you talk to me with your mouth full or smack your lips while you eat. I go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde in 3 seconds flat. It sucks. And it is work to suppress it. I'm sorry. Man. I feel awful whenever I go out for a walk while my husband is eating potato chips. Can't stand TGD crunching sound. But I'd never ask a roomie or stranger to tone it down. I'd excuse myself and go to another room for a bit until you finished. When I first moved out I lived with one of my longtime friends and his girlfriend. I'm a girl by the way. This will be important to the story. She ended up being absolutely insane. One day I came home and she was sitting on the couch with another guy really close and I asked her who she was with and what she was doing. She told me it's none of my business and we got into a fight over. She was cheating on my friend and demanded that I leave the house. My friend backed me up and we ended up kicking her out. To add the icing on the cake she also thought that me and my friend were fucking. Even though we had opposite schedules and she was home all the time. Never live with couples.